This is a story about a man who wasn't just a white-collar criminal. He was a king. A man who built a financial empire on a Caribbean island, lived a life of unimaginable luxury, and became a knight in the eyes of the government he manipulated. But it was all a lie. A meticulously constructed lie that siphoned the life savings of thousands of ordinary people, leaving a trail of devastation that spanned the globe. This is the true crime documentary of Allen Stanford, the mastermind behind a $7 billion Ponzi scheme, and the relentless investigation that finally exposed him. On February 17, 2009, the world watched as a financial titan's empire crumbled. It was on this day that the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission, or SEC, filed civil fraud charges against Sir Allen Stanford and 3 of his companies: Stanford International Bank, Stanford Group Company, and Stanford Capital Management. The allegations were staggering: a massive, ongoing Ponzi scheme spanning more than a decade and amounting to over $7 billion in fraudulent certificates of deposit, or CDs. Panic erupted. Investors, from retirees in Texas to business owners in Venezuela, found their accounts frozen, their savings vanishing into thin air. Stanford's public image, cultivated over decades, was shattered in a single day. The man who had been a symbol of security and wealth was now revealed as one of the most audacious financial criminals in history. Robert Allen Stanford was born into a prominent family in Mejia, Texas, in 1950. He was a natural charmer with a knack for making connections. After a few failed business ventures, he found his calling in the high-stakes world of finance. By the mid-1980s, he had relocated to the small, sun-drenched island of Antigua in the Caribbean. He saw an opportunity in the island's lax financial regulations and established Stanford Financial Group. It was here, far from the watchful eyes of American regulators, that he began to build his kingdom. He didn't build it in secret. Allen Stanford was a public figure in Antigua, and he embraced the role wholeheartedly. He invested heavily in the local economy, bought up properties, and sponsored major cricket tournaments, becoming the nation's largest private employer. He even purchased the country's main newspaper. In 2006, for his contributions to the Antiguan's economy, he was granted knighthood by the Antiguan's government. He was no longer just Allen Stanford. He was Sir Allen Stanford. This title was a powerful tool. It lent him an air of royalty, authority, and unquestionable legitimacy. It was the perfect facade for the criminal enterprise he was building. The centerpiece of his empire was the Stanford International Bank. It was a beacon of what appeared to be stability, promising investors something that seemed too good to be true: CDs with consistently high, fixed returns, far exceeding what was available from competitors. Financial advisors in the U.S. were trained to sell these products, and they did so with confidence. Stanford had created a perfect ecosystem of trust. He held lavish events, wined and dined potential clients, and even hosted his own television show, The Allen Stanford Show, to promote his brand. He wasn't just a banker, he was a celebrity. This public-facing persona was his greatest asset, drawing in victims who believed they were investing with a man of impeccable character and unparalleled success. The heart of the criminal operation lay in a secret, internal system. Stanford International Bank was not a legitimate financial institution. It was the vehicle for a classic Ponzi scheme. The bank didn't invest client funds in the low-risk, high-return securities it promised. Instead, new investor money was used to pay off older investors and to fund Allen Stanford's own breathtakingly extravagant lifestyle. The fraud was simple in its execution but complex in its scale. Stanford and his chief financial officer, James M. Davis, created fake financial statements that were sent to investors and regulators. These reports claimed the bank's assets were being managed by a team of professional portfolio managers and were invested in a diverse portfolio of liquid securities. The reality was a complete fabrication. Stanford's books were cooked to the tune of billions of dollars. To keep the illusion alive, Stanford used a sham auditor. The company's auditing firm, Stanford Group Company, was in fact owned by Allen Stanford himself. It was a one-man show with a single, unqualified accountant who simply signed off on the falsified reports without question. This is a critical point that serves as a massive red flag. A legitimate financial firm is audited by an independent, third-party firm with no ties to the company. Stanford's firm, however, was structured to avoid any real oversight, allowing the fraud to continue for years. As new money flowed in, the scheme grew exponentially. By 2008, Stanford's empire was managing over $7 billion in client assets. Stanford himself was living like a king, with a personal fortune estimated at over $2 billion. He owned multiple private jets, a 125-foot super yacht, and a global portfolio of properties. He was a playboy, a philanthropist, and a symbol of success, all funded by the stolen life savings of his unsuspecting victims. But as the global financial crisis of 2008 unfolded, the system began to buckle. As investors grew nervous and began demanding their money back, the cracks in Stanford's facade became impossible to ignore. The house of cards was about to fall. The SEC had been watching Stanford for years, noticing the suspiciously high fixed returns his bank offered, returns that defied logic. In 2008, they launched a formal investigation. Stanford and his team initially attempted to stonewall the regulators, refusing to provide key documents and financial statements. But the SEC pressed on, issuing subpoenas and building their case brick by brick. The crucial break in the investigation came from an insider, a senior employee at Stanford's bank, facing pressure from the FBI and SEC, became a key witness. This person provided damning testimony and a treasure trove of evidence, confirming that the company was indeed a Ponzi scheme and revealing the hidden accounts and falsified documents used to perpetrate the fraud. The evidence was irrefutable. On February 17, 2009, the SEC filed their civil complaint. The FBI immediately moved in, launching a series of coordinated raids on Stanford's offices across the country. Agents seized computers, boxes of documents, and frozen assets. Stanford himself was on the run. He attempted to escape to Antigua, but was quickly tracked down by federal agents and arrested near his home in Virginia. He was formally charged with a litany of crimes, including securities fraud, wire fraud, and money laundering. He was no longer Sir Allen, but a federal prisoner. The trial of Allen Stanford was a legal epic. It began in January 2012 and lasted for 6 weeks. Prosecutors presented a mountain of evidence, including falsified financial statements, internal communications detailing the fraud, and testimony from both victims and former employees. The prosecution argued that Stanford's entire enterprise was a sham, a black hole bank that existed only to fuel his personal greed. Stanford's defense team claimed that he was unaware of the fraudulent activities and that his CFO, James Davis, was to blame. But the jury saw through the charade. On March 6, 2012, after a little over 4 hours of deliberation, the jury returned with a guilty verdict on 13 of the 14 counts. The judge's sentence was swift and severe. Allen Stanford was sentenced to 110 years in federal prison. It was a sentence meant to ensure he would die behind bars, a clear message that his crimes would not go unpunished. His co-conspirators, including James M. Davis, who cooperated with the government, also faced justice. The human cost of the fraud was immeasurable. The $7 billion stolen had been the life savings of thousands of people. The victims, many of whom were elderly, lost their retirement funds, their homes, and their peace of mind. To date, only a fraction of the stolen money has been recovered, a devastating reality for those who lost everything. The case serves as a powerful cautionary tale, offering crucial lessons for anyone who handles money. First, be skeptical of guaranteed high returns. If an investment consistently promises returns that are significantly higher than the market average with little to no risk, it is likely a scam. Second, always verify your financial advisor's credentials. Use official resources like the SEC's Investment Advisor Public Disclosure Database to check for licenses and a history of complaints. Third, insist on transparency. Understand where your money is going and who is managing it. If an investment firm is secretive or resists independent audits, run the other way. The downfall of Allen Stanford is a story of greed, deception, and the power of a single investigation to bring down a corrupt empire. By understanding the red flags and protecting your own financial future, you can ensure that his victim's tragic story becomes a lesson, not a repeat of history. And that brings us to the end of the story of Allen Stanford. Once a knight, a financier, and a symbol of success, now serving 110 years behind bars. His empire collapsed, but his victim's pain still lingers. If you found this documentary eye-opening, don't forget to like the video, share it with others, and subscribe to the channel for more true crime stories that uncover greed, corruption, and the pursuit of justice. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next video, only here on Truvo.